that you want to try and make pierogies, and since it's a Polish dish and I'm from Poland, let me help you out with this a little bit. So pierogi is probably the most well-known Polish traditional dish. It's very old. I think it's originated around the 13th century, and it was popular both in higher and lower classes. And the dish here is, I think, pretty important to us. Eating and making pierogi became kind of a tradition for many holidays. For my family, for example, I would say it's most recognizable as a holiday Christmas dish. And the dish actually originated that way, that it was only eaten by lower classes on many holidays, like Christmas or Easter, because it is a very difficult and time-consuming dish to make. But now that people have more time and don't have to work in the fields all the time, it became a pretty everyday dish. So pierogis are a type of dumpling, and they can have many fillings. I would say that the most popular one is probably the meat or the cabbage one, maybe the cottage cheese one, but you can fill it with all sorts of things. But the recipe I'm going to give you today is for the meat filling, because I would say it's the one that is eaten the most. It's not the Christmas one, because the Christmas one has a cabbage filling, since you are not supposed to eat meat on Christmas Eve. But this one is the one that probably most people would eat for dinner.
The first step is to cook the meat in broth, so I just took some chicken stock powder and added some hot water and got that ready to go. Afterwards, I took one large onion. I had a sweet onion here because that's my favorite to cook with, and struggled very much to peel it. The recipe calls for using a food processor to blend together the vegetables and the meat, but I didn't have that, so I just cut them very fine. I added some olive oil to a frying pan so I could begin cooking the onions. Did I overload this frying pan? Absolutely. Did I stick with it? Once again, absolutely. I got pre-ground beef to cook with and just tried to cut it up as finely as I could. I added the chicken stock from earlier and let it cook alongside the onions. For the dough, I used flour and salt and mixed it up. I created a well in the middle to pour the hot water. Not too hot that you'll hurt yourself, but hot enough to make a nice, sticky and flexible dough. I got a quick start by just mixing it together before kneading it with my hands. I made sure to flour my kneading surface well. I started to work the dough a little bit in the bowl before transferring it over to the surface, and using the new space that I had, just started kneading it a bit more before separating the dough into two distinct parts to work with. This just makes it easier, especially with the given space that I'm working on. I covered up the bowl with a towel just to make sure that the dough doesn't dry out. Then I took my rolling pin and started to roll it out thinly. It has a lot of bounce, so I found that this step was actually a little more challenging than I was expecting. I then took one of my cookie cutters and started cutting out the pierogi shapes. Once the filling was done cooking, I mixed it all together in a bowl and began adding it to the pierogi dough to create the classic half-moon shape. The way that I closed it was just by pinching the sides. I didn't use any extra water or eggs or anything like that. And for the most part, the majority of them did stick, and I didn't worry about them separating. And there you have it, my first ever homemade pierogi. So I just continued filling each of the dough rounds until all of the dough was finished. I filled up a pot with hot water and added some salt to it to begin the next step. Once the water was boiling, I added only a few pierogies at a time to not overcrowd the pot. I gave them a quick stir and let them cook. Once they were floating at the top, I knew they were ready to then put in the frying pan. I just used a bit of olive oil once again to fry the sides to give them a bit of a crispy texture. When the pierogies were done frying, I just laid them down on a piece of paper towel just to absorb a little bit of that extra oil, and then they were ready to go. This was a really amazing recipe, and I loved getting the chance to make these from scratch. I've had them before at various restaurants and just from the grocery store, but they taste nothing like doing it yourself. I'm so glad that I participated in this recipe swap and got to learn a little bit more about Polish cooking. I absolutely think I will make this recipe again and try it with different fillings, but the beef and onion was very satisfying and so good. Thanks for tuning in for this recipe swap collaboration, and I hope you get a chance to watch the second part in the collab, which is a tourtière recipe, a French-Canadian recipe, on Julij's channel.